Hi everyone, welcome to our very first dev chat. My name's Dan Conn. I'm a developer advocate for Sonatype, and today we're going to talk about beware the malware. Whoa! I mean, it's not actually that scary, to be honest with you, once you know how to control it properly. But there is an interesting subject, so let's go through it. So let's start essentially, what is malware? Malware is code that's made with malicious intent, is a dictionary term. That can be incredibly wide-ranging. The first malware was made in 1971, way back before even the internet, well, before the World Wide Web, back in the ARPANET days. And it was a virus called the Creeper virus. A lot of the early malware was actually created just for jokes. A lot of people wanted to essentially like see what they could do with code. So it wasn't meant for malicious purposes. It was actually a fun thing to do, a thought experiment. And the first one of these is Creeper, and it essentially goes around the ARPANET at the time, which was like military bases, going from computer to computer and saying, "I'm the Creeper, come catch me." Now, this also 1971, because it was so popular, although benign, quite irritating. You actually then from that got the world's first antivirus program called Reaper, which went around the same network and hunted and destroyed the Creeper. So this was the kind of state of malware for the first 10 years, let's say, until 1988, where the Morris worm changed everything. At this stage, the internet or ARPANET has kind of been extended out beyond the military and scientific world, and we're actually having the internet, which has a lot of our financial systems kind of starting to get on board with it, and as you know, everyday life. So what we essentially have is the first worm, which is spread throughout the internet. And this is created by Robert Morris. That's why it's called the Morris worm. It's created this way, again, it wasn't malicious with intent. It was just created as a way of pointing out operating system flaws. Yeah, Robert was a bit of a joker. But unfortunately, it got out of hand because the beauty of the internet and the massive connection of things is that they are all connected. And because the visibility, this worm was so successful, it went round and essentially infiltrated loads of different systems. It's quite funny. It gave the user a choice. It would say, "Would you like to be infected?" And if they said no after like 7 times of doing it, it would infect it anyway. And because of this prevalence, though, Morris was actually the first person to be convicted under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in the States. Not so great for a 23-year-old, just kind of learning their way. These days, worms have basically got a lot more advanced. I think one in particular that a lot of people might remember is the Stuxnet worm from 2010, where it's incredibly interesting bit of kit, really, from a virus perspective. What it did was target specific programmable logic controllers within Windows machines. So it would go around the internet. It would look for Windows machines in particular. And once it found a Windows machine, it would then go and look for a particular type of software called Siemens Step 7. And then once it found that, it would see if it was kind of inside a nuclear power plant centrifugal system. And if it was, then it would create some mayhem to essentially destroy the centrifuges in nuclear power plants, which is incredibly dangerous. If you can imagine if they burst, what actually happens. I still don't think it's been properly attributed as to where that actually came from, but it's the first example of worms being used for. It's not the first example, but it's a great example of modern kind of warfare or modern techniques that are used. Not warfare, modern techniques that are used to get around the internet to maybe attack others. We also saw in ransomware, computer machines that go around encrypting systems. They do it for a ransom. It's what it's termed. It's incredibly popular right now. In particular, WannaCry is a great example of this. attack the NHS systems. I think, luckily solved by Marcus Hutchins to take off the command and control system offline. There are many types of malware. So ransomware is a small amount, worm is another. You might have heard of adware or spyware, where essentially what you think you're downloading a very innocent program, and what it's actually doing is making notes. It could be logging your key logs. It could be looking at different areas. It might want to activate your camera, for example. You also have Trojans, which are viruses that sit within a different file. Crypto miners, incredibly popular. Why use your own computation when you could use somebody else's? And then on top of that, you have from these base elements, you can also have other advanced stages. So you have remote access Trojans, for example, which we have a chat on our Sonatype blog about. We found quite a few of them throughout our research team. So they're definitely worth taking a look at. On top of that, so that's essentially like the high level of what malware is. Now, how do we, the world goes on, right? It's not like it's every time we get some malware, we stop. So how do we prevent that? Well, there's a lot of research that goes into it, essentially. As a personal level, the first step is antivirus. In your personal machine will help prevent a lot of these attacks, or especially the known ones. You have a different type of malware called zero-day. It's generally, zero-day vulnerabilities to start, which is much wider than malware. They're just general threats. But then you also have zero-day malware, which essentially is malware that people don't know about yet. And they can cause problems with even the best antiviruses. I think some that look for patterns as opposed to signatures. So you have within malware, you have a signature, which is essentially a block of code, because that's all it is. It's just bad code. And these signature-based antiviruses will look for a specific signature to say this is malware. Beyond that, you have what's called pattern matching antivirus, where it will maybe use some kind of machine learning technique to understand a pattern. And it doesn't have to be the specific signature. It just has to look around the pattern to see what is actually beneficial or not. Yeah, whether that pattern is linked to something that it might have previously noticed in the past. So that's like protecting your home computer, really, or maybe if you're doing some dev work locally, and antivirus is probably going to protect you against that, or at least warn you. It might put it into a quarantine state, because again, false positives are a thing. It isn't always right. I remember using some antivirus quite some time ago when it was quite early, and it would detect everything as a virus that might have contained some code that didn't quite go right. It's very annoying to work on. I think they've got a lot better since then. So what else can we do? Well, security research teams actually disassemble malware. They use programs called disassemblers, funny enough, and they separate them out to essentially look for particular jump instructions. So one common thing that some malware does is to overwrite memory locations. It will look to, you'll have some malware that is working currently within safe areas of memory, and it will try and branch out to areas where it can overwrite operating system instructions or other elements. And when it does that, it can take control. It can put itself into the instruction set of the next thing to be executed. And when it does, it then is executed, and then you have a malicious fault. So I think these things. So I think that's the thing with malware. It tries to redirect a lot of the time from the normal control flow of systems. And what you can do is in a disassembler is find this information and follow that structure. Now, it's incredibly clever what it does. It essentially takes a program written in machine code and tries to reverse engineer it effectively to put it out into like a known programming language. So sometimes it can do C, but most of the time it is still assembler, which is an incredibly low-level language. It basically deals with moving stuff around registers, which might be alien if you're not used to thinking of your computer as separate parts. A part which has memory, a part which has many different registers within the CPU. So I think these disassemblers, they certainly help with that. Other elements, though, you can find a lot of information out just with simple Linux programs like strings. A lot of malware you might find some strings that say, "Oh, this isn't quite right. Why have you got this quite strange format within this, of ASCII characters within this particular file?" Another strange one might be that you're looking through some, in particular, you might find in Excel macros. They're a very known target to inject VB script malware within those. Now, when you split them apart, you might find in metadata there's some controls so that when the file loads, it ingests this metadata and puts it to maybe a command and control element, which is essentially a different website and domain it calls out to do that. And various other aspects. So I think that's essentially how you overcome them. But there's a lot of issues as well around. This is just a sheer volume. I think research done by Sonatype basically suggests that we're going to get onto like a trillion vulnerabilities in open source. A trillion usages within open source, and that's quite difficult to maintain. I think there's just a lot of vulnerabilities around. In particular, at the moment, we're seeing not just Java, we're seeing Python in particular getting targeted. We're seeing various different myriad ways of finding these. And what we can do is essentially use a lot of tools to help with that. In particular, we might be good at having our antivirus here, to protect us locally. But what happens if we're pulling in bad products, such as so I think, for example, there's a lot of dependencies, and within dependencies, they might pull in something nefarious. I think one thing we found is a crypto miner within a Python script that was it basically used what we call dependency confusion to essentially mistake try and confuse the user, thinking, oh, that's actually the legitimate package, when actually it's like one slight spelling mistake or using an ASCII font which is incorrect. Now, what things like products that that Sonatype produce, but also many others, what they produce is essentially they look for these dependency confusion elements. They use artificial intelligence to detect these systems, and once they do that, they can then hopefully protect your dependencies within your code to stop you getting infected. So I think that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining. It's quite a short one. It's a pilot, so hopefully there's a few more of these. Hopefully you've learned something from malware, and hopefully see you next month.